I would just say, from my experience, a lot of dietitians and clinicians, we tend to be like pretty perfectionist and like really like slow to move because we're trying to make sure everything's perfect. And like I always say to people, like, it's not going to be perfect. We have to start. We just have to start somewhere, whether that's like, starting with a website, starting with certain brand colors, starting with a niche, starting with your first email newsletter, like just starting. It is all going to evolve. I mean, in 9+ years, my business has evolved multiple times and it keeps evolving. It's always a work in progress. So I would say just starting where you are is important.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to RDs Thriving in Private Practice, where we share our collective wisdom about building a nutrition practice and get inspired. I'm Catherine Dittman. Joining me today is Alissa Rumsey. Alissa provides online intuitive eating coaching, weight-inclusive nutrition counseling, and body image healing in Brooklyn, New York. In addition to individual nutrition coaching, she and her team offer group programs and online courses to help clients make peace with food and their bodies. She also offers a suite of free and paid resources to help weight-inclusive clinicians succeed in private practice from a values-based lens. Alissa is the author of Unapologetic Eating, Make Peace with Food and Transform Your Life, a book about food freedom, intuitive eating, and liberation. Welcome, Alissa, and thanks for joining today.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, let's start by talking about the shift you made from traditional clinical dietetics to the weight-inclusive space.
Yeah. So I started my career working at a large inpatient teaching hospital. Thought I'd be there for a year or two, and fast forward, was there for like 7 years. And during that time, I was mostly working in the intensive care units doing critical care nutrition support and was not at all familiar with weight inclusive care, intuitive eating, even like none of that was on my radar. And it actually wasn't until I was already in private practice that I made that shift. So the first shift was going from a clinical role to starting my practice, my business, which was about 9.5 years ago. And then I believe it was like a year or two into being in private practice. I did a lot of, it was a huge learning curve, as it is, I think, for a lot of us with the business aspect of things. And so I was doing all these trainings and trying to like learn all this stuff. And I got to this place where I thought, okay, like business is going well. I want to start, really working more on my counseling skills and integrating more of that. And so I stumbled upon a training on intuitive eating that I thought was going to be similar to mindful eating or mindfulness. And that's what really introduced me to to weight inclusive research, to research supporting that kind of practice. And it was one of those things that part of me thought, okay, I've been a dietitian for, I don't know, something like 8 years at that point. How am I just learning this now? And on the other hand, I was also like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense, both in thinking about some of my own experiences with food, but also in thinking about a lot of my clients that I had worked with for the past couple of years in private practice. That I actually started out with a weight-centric practice and then transitioned into a weight-inclusive one.
Interesting. That's such a transformation that you kind of had just by being in the thick of it, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a little scary because, again, my business had finally like stabilized. Like I was getting clients consistently, things were good. And I was like, okay, now what? I'm going to blow this all up and like totally do things differently. So it was definitely a lot of fear with that. And I just kept coming back to like, no, this just feels so right and so aligned for me. I was also lucky at the time. I did have the private practice, but I also had a bunch of other streams of income. And so it kind of worked out that I was able to, I finished out the clients I was working with, but then I sort of hit pause for a bit and let myself, because it was a totally different approach to nutrition and health and well-being. So the other streams of income were really helpful in that I was able to kind of hit pause for, I think, maybe 3 or 4 months with new clients, and then pick back up once I had more training and more kind of an understanding of how I was going to approach things a little bit differently.
Okay. I'm very interested in hearing a little bit about that pivot, but can we back up, and just because this is really intended to hear about how people really get started. And you mentioned that you had taken some trainings and were learning and gathering a lot of resources. Are you able to share anything that you found particularly helpful?
Sure. So yeah, I kind of took the leap into business without knowing too much. I had been doing some consulting on the side. So I had some contracts. I had also started doing some home care for in the blenderized tube feed realm. So I had some clients and some things, and but yeah, just everything from like websites and pricing and kind of like all of that stuff, right? It was such a huge learning curve. So I joined the Nutrition Entrepreneur DPG of the Academy, and they used to have this incredible listserv. I don't know if you were ever a part of that, but I learned so much from that listserv. The listserv itself no longer exists. They do have an online forum that replaced the listserv, but that was something that I don't even think I asked questions myself that often, but just learning from what other people had asked and looking back at past topics. So I would say the Nutrition Entrepreneur DPG. And then, because again, this was almost 10 years ago, so there was not as many resources out there as there are today. But I'd say that. And then the other thing was just the relationships that I had built. So I had been in the field for a while. And at the time, I was actually a spokesperson for the Academy, a media spokesperson for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And so most of my fellow spokespeople were entrepreneurs. And just having this community of people who had done this and, were a couple of years, if not more, out from where I was at my starting place was really helpful to just have people to bounce ideas off of, to say like, hey, am I on the right track with this? So I think that was also really invaluable in terms of some of those first resources and kind of figuring out what to do.
Great. Did you make any mistakes? Anything that you wish that you'd had better guidance on starting out?
That's a really good question. The first thing that came to mind is I remember one of my first home care clients. So I was still working full time at the hospital, and had gotten linked up. Some of my former nurses and speech language pathologists who I used to work with in the ICU were doing home care, and they were like, hey, we need a dietitian. And I was really nervous. I thought about the price a lot. I'm pretty sure I talked to some friends and colleagues about what to charge. And then I was still so nervous communicating the price that I dropped it down. And then I show up. So I live in New York City. I show up in this apartment and I'm standing in the foyer. There's a foyer. And for anyone who's lived in New York City or lives in a city, that is very rare. And the apartment took up literally the entire block. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't think I should have dropped my rate on this. So I think, that was something, it was definitely a struggle for me at the beginning to feel confident in my rates coming from, again, a clinical position where I was not, salaries were not high. And so even $100 an hour just sounded like this outrageous number to charge. And so I think that was a big learning curve for me. And luckily I had people in my corner who were able to share okay, Alissa, it's not just the hour of your time that they're paying you for. They're paying you for all this expertise that you have, your years of training, this credential that you've gotten and maintained. That's what they're paying you for. And so, I think being able to have people around me that kind of bolstered me up was also so helpful. But yeah, I would say pricing was one of the things at the beginning that I struggled with.
Great tip. And I think that is a tricky thing because, as you said, you're not just paying for the hour of time, you're paying for the expertise and the knowledge and any additional work that you have to do in order to do consultations about a case or research or background discussions, all of that kind of stuff, coordinating care. Then factoring in that of that $100, how much do you actually keep? What's your actual profit there, right? Or your own pay, and then your business profit. I mean, it's like, these are the kinds of financial issues that we just aren't trained in. So I think it really pays. I wish I'd looked into this a long time ago. So I totally
me too. I mean, the idea of financial forecasting, like, I didn't even know what that meant. And, you know, I think like I had set my rates by looking at other dietitians' rates online. I actually remember like kind of cold calling people and like pretending I was going to be like, was looking to work with them. This was, you know, I think our field is moving to a more place of like transparency with rates, but at the time, most people didn't have them on their website. And so, but that's how I initially said it. And as I've learned, while it can be helpful to get sort of a general sense of where the market is, we should not be setting our rates based upon someone else's, because we have no idea their business expenses, their business model, like what it is that they're basing those numbers on. Like, we need to make sure we're basing those numbers on our own things. That's actually one of the free downloads I have on my website, is a financial forecasting workbook for clinicians, because this is something like, you know, not only does it help us build a sustainable business when we're pricing this way, but also I find that it can make us so much more confident in communicating it. Because we haven't just like pulled this number out of thin air, or like, oh, well, I'm charging this because someone else is. It's like, no, we have a solid foundation of like, this is what I need to meet my needs, to cover my expenses, etc.
Right. And would you mind, once this is over, we can add in the comments a link to your website, or maybe where they can get that download. So I think that's probably a really valuable asset for people. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize to anybody watching that this is yucky stuff that we don't necessarily want to do, but not doing it will cost you in the long run. And figuring it out early enough, finding help, you'll be really, really grateful that you did. Yes.
Yeah. And even, you know, I work with a lot of practice owners who've been in practice for several years and they haven't done this, and we do it then. You know, it's like, even if you haven't done it, going back, and it might come out that your rates are in a good spot, but just so you have that foundation, and so you know, because things change, our business model changes. You know, lots of different things can affect this. Our expenses can change. So going back to it periodically, I think, is important as well.
Yeah. And, you know, one other thing I'll add is that when you said that we don't know what another business's model is, that is one reason why some of those companies that are out there right now promising that they'll get insurance reimbursement, you know, I'm not going to name any names, they have a different business model. They can charge less, right? They've got something else going on. So, you know, we all have to figure it out for us and match what we can offer to that and what will sustain us as a business. So let me reorient myself here. Let's just finish up this topic. Bookkeeper, CPA, did you seek legal advice at any point? Web design help, just stuff where you were finding that you needed support from other people's expertise in order to support a healthy practice?
Yeah, great question. So what I started out with, I was very lucky to have several friends who were lawyers. And so I was able to lean on their expertise. Both one in particular worked in corporate law, and he was, oh my gosh, so incredibly helpful with forming my business. It's actually not that difficult in New York State, but they make it seem so like it's not just laid out for you on a website. Like, they make it seem so much harder. So he was really helpful with that. He also really helped me with contracts, both with, you know, making sure the ones I had were solid, but also when I was doing more consulting work, like teaching me how to read contracts and what to look for. So I, to this day, like do all my own contracts because of his expertise and him being able to teach me that early on. So I had him for help with legal part. I did hire a friend of a friend who gave me a pretty decent discount on designing my first website. And also I'd requested that he did it in such a way where he could then teach me how to update it and like use what I now know as a theme that is easy to have me update. And so I did that. I did not have a bookkeeper. I did like Excel files for the first couple of years and just like manually tracking income and expenses. And then I eventually moved to QuickBooks, maybe like 2 or 3 years into my practice. And I did hire a bookkeeper at that time. I still do my own bookkeeping actually to this day, but I hired a bookkeeper to set me up on QuickBooks and to just teach it to me, which was also really invaluable. And then I do have a bookkeeper who, helps kind of at the end of the year, or if I get stuck with something in QuickBooks, because they're always changing something, she helps me like fix things, but I still do my month to month. And then an accountant. Those were the first couple of things. I had an accountant like the first year out.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Again, these are things that we all have to figure out when the right time is to seek that extra help. Some people say the earlier the better, just get it done. But, some people are really good with keeping their books. I don't count myself as a huge numbers person. So I like to know that someone else is adding things up correctly, putting them in the right place and all that. So we all have to really know ourselves, I think. Yeah. So let's get back to that pivot. What I'm interested in is you said that you took a few months to kind of, what I'm assuming is doing a little bit of defining your niche, rebranding a little bit, maybe changing how you communicate to your audience, who you serve. And I think I was surprised that you actually invested so much time in doing that, because I do think that sometimes people think that that's a faster process. Could you describe that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like was introduced to weight inclusive care through learning about the intuitive eating framework, and then kind of went down a rabbit hole from there. And yeah, as you said, it was really shifting. It was shifting my niche, but honestly, the niche in terms of people I wanted to serve and support was the same. It was more how I was communicating about that. And so niche was kind of similar, but just sort of in thinking about it through a different lens. And then definitely like all my marketing language on my website, like all that had to be updated. I was using social media a lot at the time. And so it was sort of going through, archiving things, thinking about how that shift was going to be. I planned a series of blog posts and accompanying emails to my email list that kind of described the shift and also just introduced people to this concept, because this was back in like 2016, 2017, like a few years before intuitive eating hit a little bit more mainstream, or at least mainstream on some social media platforms. So yeah, I was really like, okay, let me write this blog post because people coming in probably haven't heard of this. So I wasn't even really using the term intuitive eating to describe necessarily what I did, because it wasn't as well known. So it was really thinking about, okay, how can I explain, the shifts? How can I explain my philosophy? So it was a lot of redoing the marketing components, website, social media, blog, email. And then also just my own training and thinking about how that would shift my work with my clients as well. So yeah, it was a lot of work, and again, felt very grateful that I had other income streams coming in and that I was able to actually take this time to really put time into it, because yeah, I think it would have been much harder and maybe taken longer if I had been seeing a full caseload. And I think it probably would have taken longer, not only the whole like rebranding marketing piece, but also just my own shifts as a clinician, because I definitely did find it challenging with the people who had come to me for weight loss. And now I'm sort of shifting my approach, and, that's not what they came to me for. So yeah, being able to hit pause was really helpful. Nice. And I know not everyone has that ability, but I felt lucky that just where my business was and the other things I was doing allowed that to be an option.
Yeah. And that's something that seems to be a reoccurring theme here, is that we each have some advantage that we can leverage in our own business, whether it's, like you said, you had some other income streams that you were able to float, or maybe some people took advantage of the time that they used during pandemic to maybe strategize or something, or maybe they have a partner that is able to float them for a little while, or, some other way that they can do it. But we all have something that we can hang on to that, is kind of our thing. So I think we all need to be able to recognize that. What was I going to ask? Okay, here's a good question. So you have a background in health communication, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. So I think I understand conceptually what that means. And my question is, does that include knowing how to market, or did you have to learn that in separately from that? So you already have the skill of knowing how to communicate the health stuff, but then what marketing strategies did you need to bring on board in order to use that knowledge?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. So I got a master's degree in health communications, and this was back when I was doing a lot of media work. I was really enjoying social media. I was working at the hospital when I started that program and was really getting involved with their PR department and their social media department. And so that program, the program I did in health communications, there was maybe, this is a really good question. I haven't really thought about this in a while. There was maybe a little bit of marketing. I remember writing press releases, for example, but writing press releases isn't necessarily something we're doing on a regular basis in a private practice. So I think some of it didn't necessarily pertain to a day-to-day marketing in a private practice. But certainly just the skill of communicating in writing, in media interviews, kind of thinking about your audience. I think those aspects were really helpful. And certainly the training I got as a media spokesperson for the academy was also really helpful in those realms. And then it was kind of, learning about, because from my recollection at the time anyway, that program, it didn't have anything on email marketing. I think there was probably some social media, but again, it was less. There's always this lens of okay, when you're a solo practitioner or a small group practice, that's going to look differently than a big corporation. So some of it was really helpful for sure. And then it was kind of turning it to, learning how do you write an email newsletter, and how do you use, I started with MailChimp back in the day. How do I even use this? I remember sitting in a coffee shop and just giving myself the entire day to watch videos and learn how to use MailChimp.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the amount of time that it may take to really learn how to use a piece of technology. Yeah. So we just need to give ourselves that kind of time and just dedicate it to the learning process. Yeah, that's great. So right now, there seems to be we're kind of on the precipice of this AI boom. No one knows where it's going. There seems to be just a flood of, let me just say, garbage content out of there that is trying to optimize for keywords, et cetera, et cetera. Have you felt any impact, or have you needed to start looking for a shift in how you're doing your own marketing?
Absolutely. I mean, I've honestly noticed an impact probably for the last, maybe starting in, was it fall of 2021, I believe? So the last 2 to 3 years, huge impact. I mean, and again, part of this is I got lucky with when I entered sort of starting to blog about the topics I was blogging about in 2017. But I literally rode the wave of from maybe 5 to 6 blog posts gave me the majority of my website traffic and clients for 5 years. And Google algorithms, this is even before AI, just with the Google algorithm, they've been doing so many changes the past couple of years. And my website got hit really hard. It also happened at a time where I was making branding updates. So I like wasn't blogging and, you know, all these kind of factors together. And then, yeah, I think just AI is going to make it, or has made it also so much more challenging, especially for small businesses. So yeah, I used to get literally all of my clients from internet search. And now I get most through some directories I'm on and through referrals. So I feel like I'm leaning a lot more into just more of the, even being, my business is fully virtual, but even being a fully virtual online business, still leaning into more like provider referrals and like local referrals, because that's where I'm seeing kind of the shift happening.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right. Do you mind sharing the directories that have been good sources for you?
Sure. So it's a couple specific to communities I belong to, or memberships I belong to. So the Certified Intuitive Eating Counselor directory and the ASDA, Association for Size and Health Diversity. Those two have been helpful for me. People have been finding me there.
Great. I did not know they had a clinician directory.
Yes.
ASDA.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
ASDA, you have to be a member, I believe, in order to be listed on there.
Well, that's fair.
So,
that's fair for sure.
Yeah.
Great tip. Thank you. We still have a few more minutes. And the question I really want to ask is, how did the book come about? Like, you share the process. Was that something where you're like, I've got this idea, I want to write a book, and you went and did the pitch? Did someone come to you? How did that work?
So it's kind of a funny story. I mean, like, the straightforward part of the story is that, you know, at some point I thought, oh, it would be nice to write a book. I enjoy writing, but I did not have a specific idea. And then a publisher reached out. Actually, two publishers had reached out. One reached out, and it's one that I believe has shut down now, but that was, you know, would pay like a flat fee, not much money. They did a lot of the work. You had to sort of follow the outline. And I actually thought the topic was going to work out, but then I saw the contract, and going back to my contract reading experience, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not. And they would not change anything. And I was like, okay, I have to walk away from this, which was really hard because they had approached me a few years prior with a different book idea and didn't choose me for that one. So that was really hard. But then just a few weeks later, another publisher reached out. I almost deleted it because I thought it was spam. Glad I didn't. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure this is real, but like, let me schedule a call with this person. And it was a small publishing imprint that historically published a lot of diet books, a lot of recipe, like cookbooks. And I think they saw, this was 2019, so they saw intuitive eating kind of rising in popularity. One of their VPs had read about it and just was like, oh my gosh, this resonates so much with me personally. Like, I want to put more books about this out there. And so, talk about SEO and blogging. They found me because they started like Googling and saw my writing that I did and reached out to me and said, have you ever wanted to write a book? And if so, what would you write about? So on this call, like I said, consciously, I hadn't thought about this, but I pulled out this pitch during that call that ended up being the crux of my entire book, which tells me, and then I went back and I'd actually attended a retreat earlier that year, and I hadn't revisited the work I had done in that retreat. And this was like when my book was almost about ready to come out, like all of this stuff. And I went back, I was like, oh, I think I had some good ideas during that retreat. What were some of those ideas? And one was a book called Unapologetic Eating, which was like very wild because they were the ones that suggested the name, like based on stuff that I had written, but I had come up with that like 8 months before they even reached out, but just forgot about it because I was doing all these other things. So I really believe like it was in me. And I just like hadn't consciously thought about it, and then getting the opportunity with them reaching out. And then, that first sentence that I said to him ended up really being what the whole book was about.
Great. How long did the writing process take? About just a rough estimate.
Yeah, so I mean, their timeline was a little bit faster than some of the more traditional publishing houses. I think I had maybe 4 or 5 months to write it, but I signed my contract at the end of February 2020. And I lived in Manhattan at the time. And needless to say, the world changed a few weeks later. And my anxiety was off the charts. And like, I think maybe between March and June of 2020, I maybe wrote 1 chapter. I had like outlined things. And then my partner and I decided to escape the city for a couple of months, and we went to the woods. And I wrote pretty much the entire book in 2 months once I got some more clear headspace and a more regulated nervous system.
Wow. Wow. So you're happy with the product. I assume so. It's
Yeah.
a very comprehensive work. And did you have to go through edits back and forth? Like, how long before it was actually like done, ready to publish?
Yeah, so the editing process back and forth was maybe like 5 or 6 months. I had an amazing editor whose brain just like worked like mine, and she was so wonderful to work with. And again, being a new author, I was kind of expecting them to push back on some of the things I wrote about. Nope. Like everything I wrote remained in there. They gave me a lot of input on the cover and the cover design. And so, yeah, it was probably like 5 or 6 months of edits. And then just a few months after that, it was published. So it was published in February of 2021. So start to finish, it was a year process, which is pretty quick.
Great, great. And did you feel that all said and done, that the contract and your compensation was fair and reasonable, all said and done?
Yeah. So again, reached out to this lawyer friend who does not work in publishing, but he gave me some really amazing resources. I did end up finding a lawyer who specialized in publishing because I was able to make a lot of edits on my own, but wanted to run a few things by someone. And she was great. Most lawyers will be like, no, I need to read the whole contract, start to finish. You need to pay me for that time. And I was like, I just have a few questions. And she's like, okay. So yeah, I was actually really happy with, what they gave me. And it was a like traditional publishing contract with royalties and everything like that.
Nice. Nice. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So we're at the end of our time now. I didn't get to ask about how you added more clinicians. We didn't get much into the business coaching work that you do, but please feel free to drop a link to that. And, are you taking on new business mentoring clients at this point? Okay. So in the audience, if you see this, reach out to Alissa and take advantage of her wealth of knowledge. Yeah. So any final thoughts or words of wisdom, parting thoughts?
I would just say, from my experience, a lot of dietitians and clinicians, we tend to be like pretty perfectionist and like really like slow to move because we're trying to make sure everything's perfect. And like I always say to people, like, it's not going to be perfect. We have to start. We just have to start somewhere, whether that's like, yeah, starting with a website, starting with certain brand colors, starting with a niche, starting with your first email newsletter, like just starting. It is all going to evolve. I mean, in 9+ years, my business has evolved multiple times and it keeps evolving. It's always a work in progress. So I would say just starting where you are is important.
Very reassuring. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Alissa. And thanks to everybody who joined us. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.